That was the time when you said Chicago and someone would respond like a Pavlovian dog, segregation. Or you said Chicago and people talked about the 1968 riots. Or said Chicago was where everyone went who didn't want to be anybody. But now, anywhere in the world you go, Israel, Egypt, Rome, Shanghai, Tokyo, Nairobi, Zimbabwe. Now, you go to any of those places and you say you're from Chicago, you know what they'll say to you? How's Harold?
Harold won against the odds. He died with an enlarged heart, but not a broken heart. It was enlarged by 3 because he had to have a big heart to make room for all of Chicago.
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
We want to do something. We're not going to let this thing die. You know, we're not going to let the dream die.
Martin Luther King had a dream. Harold had a dream.
He was the wave of the future then, and he's the wave of the future now. Because Harold carefully built the leadership in the city that was so democratic, was so fairly put together, that nobody could complain.
He believed that he could achieve a measure of equity or fairness through the political system. He didn't rely on religion or morality. He relied on political power.
I would say that I think he managed to deracialize politics in Chicago when he was elected one-on-one, where it wasn't just that everybody will always vote for their own clan, and that's just the way it's going to be. You know, after all, it's only been I think 4 years ago that Boston elected its first Italian mayor, which was a major breakthrough in Boston. And I think I think that made a difference. The other, I think, is that he was associated with being successful. Other black mayors before him had been associated with declining cities. They'd gotten control as the cities were on their way out. And he's begun a string of successful black mayors around the country, with Mike White in Cleveland being an example, Kurt Schmoke in Baltimore. A number of black mayors who are now viewed as successful mayors, not simply figures who are coming in a declining period of a city.
What Harold did now has been enlarged and held in people's memory. I mean, Harold is a legend now.
Harold Washington was not the first black mayor of a major northern city. Those honors went to others like Carl Stokes of Cleveland, Coleman Young of Detroit. But those cities were largely abandoned by white flight. Chicago was different. The population in 1983 was equally divided in 3, black, white, and Hispanic. It was one of the richest cities on earth. No one suspected that a black political wizard from the South Side had his eye on that prize since he was a boy.
There have been 41 mayors before me. When I was growing up in this city and attending its public schools, it never dawned upon me, nor did I dream, that the flame would pass my way.
Harold used to refer to us as being 2 households but 1 family. There's the Washington brood and the Price brood. When Mom married his father, Roy, and her name was Bertha Jones, comes from Southern Illinois. And from that union, there were 3 boys and a girl. He was athletic, extremely good looking, okay. You know, he had no problem with the ladies at all.
He was brilliant, a cafeteria reader, a man that I can remember when we would, I was maybe 12, he was about 10, and we were playing sandlot baseball, and I never saw him without a book.
He always seemed to have had something a little special above everyone else. Softball, he was the genius. Marbles, he was the genius. I don't care where you went, he just seemed to have been on a plateau just a little above the norm. And of course, we all admired him because I think he placed first in the city and then went downstate. And as I vaguely remember, I think he placed third downstate without practice.
My father was a Methodist minister and the son of a Methodist minister, but he was also a lawyer and a politician, a very peculiar, strange combination, which breeds a kind of an individual in which there's a high moral tone in the family, a certain discipline, a certain, if you believe it, prove it attitude, certain desire for excellence and a demand for excellence in terms of how you comported your life.
We were out of high school before we learned that his father was a lawyer and his stepmother was a social worker, which of course was big time for the 30s, you see. But he was just one of the ragamuffins of the streets, an urchin of the street. He never played above that, whereas he was definitely, as he said, close to the manner born, middle class, upper middle class.
My wife was associate professor of psychology, teaching at Roosevelt University. In her class was Harold Washington, and although she doesn't remember all her students, she remembers him as being outstanding. She says that he showed signs of leadership, and one day there was a sign in the room that there was an election for the student government, and she said to him, because she recognized his leadership qualities, that you ought to run for that. And he did, and he was elected president of the student government.
He had a great sense of humor, a great sense of humor. I can remember he was at my house one night and we had had dinner, and my den was at the other end of the house. And when after we were doing the dishes and I was going up to the den to look at TV, because he was supposed to be up there looking at TV, I get to the entrance hall, and all of a sudden he jumps out of the closet to scare me. Well, he scared me so much until I hollered and it scared him. So we both wound up but he thought that was hilarious.
And the class behind me was Harold Washington. And when I graduated, of course, I was the only black graduating, and in the year behind me after I graduated was Harold Washington, was the only black in this class.
He was a classmate of mine in law school. We were both members of the, I suppose I have to acknowledge it, of the class of June 1952 at Northwestern University School of Law. And as a matter of fact, he was the treasurer of what we then called the Junior Bar Association, the Student Bar Association, during, I guess that would have been our last year in law school. So I go back for many years. And we always had, by the way, a kind of a marvelous way of explaining all of this. I don't know whether Harold started it or I started it, but we said if you look at the June 1952 graduating class from Northwestern Law School, there are only two faces that stand out, his and mine.
It's difficult for me to sit and describe to you what it was like in 1948 and 49, 50 and 51 in law school. For example, when the law firms and the judiciary would come out and interview for positions, they didn't interview us. We were not even on the board to be considered. Writing for the law review, we weren't considered. Things have changed since then, but those are the turbulent experiences that we had. We came out of law school. We didn't have the benefit of going to clerk for this judge or that justice or going to that law office. In fact, when we came out of law school